Adolf Hitler. I mean, the name itself is basically a synonym for absolute evil. But what if I told you the man behind the monster was a strict vegetarian, a passionate animal lover, and a full-blown drug addict? To really understand the depths of his evil, we have to look at the bizarre and contradictory life he lived. Okay, let's be perfectly clear from the start. We're talking about a man who is directly responsible for the deaths of tens of millions of people. The sheer scale of the suffering he orchestrated is, well, it's almost impossible to even wrap your head around. But it's right there, in the shadow of that immense cruelty, that the contradictions of his personal life become so profoundly disturbing. And this is where the picture starts to get really strange. For the last 7 years of his life, Hitler was a strict vegetarian. Can you just imagine that? Him, sitting at a dinner party, lecturing his guests on the horrors of animal suffering, all while orchestrating the industrial-scale slaughter of millions of human beings. And look, this wasn't just about his diet. He had a deep and by all accounts genuine affection for animals. He absolutely doted on his dogs. He would literally cover his eyes during movies if a scene showed any cruelty to an animal. This is the same man who showed absolutely zero of that empathy for human life. And then, to top it all off, by the end of his life, he was severely dependent on a daily cocktail of drugs. We're talking potent opiates, all administered by his personal physician. It's just another unbelievable layer to the whole story. So, a vegetarian, animal-loving drug addict who orchestrated a genocide. How on earth do all those pieces fit together? It doesn't make any sense, right? Well, to even begin to understand it, we've got to go all the way back to the beginning. All right, Section 1, the failed artist. You see, long before the world knew him as a dictator, Adolf Hitler had a completely different ambition. What he wanted, more than anything else, was to be a great artist. And honestly, his youth was pretty unremarkable. He was born into a middle-class family, did all right in school, even sang in his church choir. But then his strict father died when he was just 13, and that's when he really latched onto this dream of becoming a painter. But that dream, it was completely shattered. He got rejected not once, but twice by the prestigious Vienna Academy of Fine Arts. This failure was a huge blow. It sent him into this downward spiral of poverty where he was living in homeless shelters and selling postcards just to survive. And this period, filled with frustration and resentment, was absolutely critical in shaping his worldview. So, how does a failed artist become a dictator? Well, he exploited a nation that was on its knees. The absolute chaos of post-World War I Germany created the perfect environment for his poisonous ideology to take root. It's really hard to overstate how desperate things were. The German economy completely collapsed. I mean, imagine getting paid and having your money become worthless before you can even get to the store. People were literally burning cash for heat because it was cheaper than buying wood. This was the fertile ground that allowed extremism to flourish. And his rise to power was shockingly fast. After a failed coup in 1923, he cleverly used his trial as a huge propaganda platform. He ended up serving a pretty comfortable 9 months in prison where he wrote his manifesto, Mein Kampf. Once he was out, he changed his strategy. Instead of violent overthrow, he would use democracy to destroy democracy. By exploiting all that public anger and political division, he went from a prisoner to the absolute dictator of Germany in just 10 years. Okay, Section 3, the dictator's private life. So now, with absolute power secured, his public persona was all set. But behind closed doors, the contradictions in his character just got more and more extreme. Publicly, he was preaching this brutal ideology of racial purity and total control. But privately, this obsession with purity twisted into some truly bizarre personal habits. He was fixated on the pure blood of his German shepherd. He was a germaphobe who couldn't stand shaking hands, and he adopted vegetarianism because he believed eating meat would defile his body. And his relationships with women, they reveal a deeply disturbing pattern of control and despair. His niece, Geli Raubal, who he was obsessively controlling over, died by suicide. Unity Mitford, a British admirer, shot herself when the war began. And his long-term partner, Eva Braun, attempted suicide twice. It's like a dark aura of self-destruction surrounded any woman who got close to him. In public, though, he kept up this carefully crafted image. He famously told the German people that he was married to Germany, projecting himself as the celibate leader who was completely devoted to the nation. And you know what?
It was a propaganda masterstroke that hid his turbulent private life and massively boosted his appeal, particularly among women.
As the war went on, his physical health just collapsed into addiction. It started with simple vitamin shots from his personal physician. But in 1941, after he got sick, he was given this potent opiate cocktail and was instantly hooked. Then, in 1944, Allied bombs destroyed the factory producing his drugs, cutting off his supply. That shaking, trembling figure you see in the final newsreels, that wasn't just a defeated leader. It was a man in the agony of severe drug withdrawal. Which brings us right to the end. As Soviet troops encircled Berlin in April of 1945, Hitler retreated into his underground bunker, his fantasy of a 1,000-year Reich literally crumbling to dust just meters above his head. His final hours were just this chilling, methodical display of self-destruction. First, he tested his cyanide pills on his favorite dog, Blondie, to make sure they'd work. After she died, he had her puppies shot. Then, he finally married Eva Braun in a grim, quick ceremony. After saying goodbye to his staff, they went to their room and committed suicide together. But even death wasn't the end of his journey. Following his final orders, his body was partially burned. When the Soviets found the remains, they buried and exhumed them multiple times, terrified that his grave would become some kind of neo-Nazi shrine. Finally, they just cremated the remains and scattered the ashes in a river. Today, the only thing that survives are his dental records, kept under lock and key in Moscow. And yet, decades later, the man and the monster continue to cast this enormous shadow, not just in history books, but in the way we all argue today. You've almost certainly seen this happen, probably in an online argument. It's a logical fallacy and it has a name, reductio ad Hitlerum. It's the fallacy of trying to win an argument by comparing your opponent's view to Hitler. The moment someone says, you know who else was a vegetarian? Hitler? That's it. It's a cheap trick meant to shut down debate by invoking the ultimate evil. And that leaves us with one final big question. Why does this figure, this complex and contradictory man who became an avatar of pure evil, continue to hold such power in our modern world? Why, after everything we know, does the ultimate villain so often remain the ultimate and final argument?